We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest this morning, malpractice attorney Clint Kelly. Good to have him on. Nice to see you. And the phone lines are open, 737-7587. Before we take the calls, just want to be clear to folks again. They're like, look, I'm hurt, I'm suffering, I just came through surgery, I might have a case. How can I afford to hire an attorney?
You don't have to pay anything.
Okay.
The patient or the client doesn't pay anything unless there's a recovery. So I front the costs. I take the case to trial or to a settlement, and the only thing the client has to pay is out of the proceeds from the recovery. So if a client is concerned, oh God, I don't know how I'm going to pay for this, or even the phone call, don't worry about that. You don't have to. You got enough problems on your hand without having to worry about that.
That's called a contingency.
Correct.
Is there a percentage that you're bound by law that you can take? What do you get from a settlement?
By statute, 1/3. So it's $1 for every $3 that's recovered. That's by law.
1/3, $1 for every $3 that are recovered. And so they basically can come to you and you handle everything from that point. I'll say this, a lot of these cases can be very expensive to move forward with.
Absolutely.
You have to bring in medical experts, all this. So in fairness, we should say there have been cases where you felt there was an injustice done, but the damages weren't great enough so you could not affordably do this, and you do have to make a living.
Yeah, you know, Nick, that's probably the most painful of all. That and the statute of limitations are cases where I look at them and I know there's probably been malpractice, but it's not economically feasible to bring the case simply because it's too expensive. If you have someone whose damages might be $50,000, $75,000 and you're going to spend that much just to try the case, you can't afford to take it.
Yeah.
And you know, the client is like, look, what's for me? I mean, so I'm fall between the cracks. Is that the way it is? And I tell the client, tell them the same thing. Until the laws are changed to make the system more patient friendly, those types of cases aren't going to be brought in court.
So the truth is, most cases, when you do take them, are cases obviously you feel that you can win and that you could settle.
Correct.
But you're not afraid, and you do at times litigate, which means go into the courtroom and actually argue as opposed to just sign a settlement deal.
You know, Nick, I took a few of those and I was trying to, this is called a theory, I was trying to prove or falsify one or the other, and I thought if I took the case and I wrote a letter and explained the facts to the doctor's insurance company or the hospital, I could get a quick check for the client and not have to spend much money. They will defend a case to the death, whether it is an absolute case of liability or whether it's a case that's a close call that they can defend, but they will defend both of them to the death. They will force you to spend that money, force you to prosecute that case to the end, and they do that because they're trying to run off cases from people who have, these people you're talking about, who have good cases but very limited damages. Gotcha. That's the mindset, and when you do that enough and you start spending money or burning money, you figure, I can't afford to run a business this way.
Yep. All right, let's take some phone calls. We'll start things off with, we have Joe on line one.
Joe.
Yeah, Joe, Clint was wondering if you'd call in. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing okay. Just a brief scenario, something that happened to me here not long ago. I went to, I was having symptoms of coughing and wheezing and feeling bad, and I went to a walk-in clinic on Saturday morning. Okay, the person there said, you know, it seemed like you got sinus drainage or whatever. Give me over-the-counter cough syrup and some over-the-counter sinus medicine. By Sunday afternoon, I was feeling bad, couldn't hardly go, so I went to the emergency room at the hospital. They did x-rays and said, well, you know, you've got pneumonia. Okay. They put me in said, we're going to put you in a room, you know. I said, well, how long is this going to be? Well, probably 2 or 3 days at least, you know, for treatment. Well, this was Sunday afternoon. Monday morning about 10:30, I done had 2 doctors come in that morning, and about 10:30, 11 o'clock, doctor walks in and says, well, we've done all we can do. We're going to give you some medications and we're going to send you home. I said, well, I'm a little bit confused, you know. Somebody with pneumonia, you going to send me home. But anyway, to make a long story short, I found out some other things that went on there at the hospital even now. They put me in as an outpatient and ask questions. Don't, you know, I was negligent on my end for not being sharp enough or have enough sense to always ask questions.
But I mean, you did ask questions, Joe. What went wrong, though? I mean, it sounds like you did everything you could.
Well, yeah, I did, but I should have. I should have. Even in the emergency room and some of the stuff they asked me there, I should have asked more questions.
Okay.
Because you can't. The medical system now is, they get you in and get you out, get as much money. I think the bill was for that little emergency room from Sunday afternoon to Monday morning was $21,000.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, that first of all, that's a whole other issue. But yeah, talk about questioning, folks, because we tend to defer. I mean, we'll ask a lot of questions of the mechanic about to work on our car, but a doctor about to work on our body, we just kind of defer. Yeah,
we've talked about that a lot, Nick, where it's probably in the DNA of Tennesseans to trust your doctor.
Sure, I do.
To a point of fault. But what Joe said is absolutely true, which is you have to ask questions. You have to push back. And it's interesting, doctors and nurses, they won't admit it to you, but that's what they want to hear because it prevents them from making mistakes. The way the system is set up is like any other system, squeaky wheel gets the grease. And if you feel like that you're not being treated properly or you feel like that you're not being paid attention to, push back on the healthcare provider and make sure that they understand clearly what you're going through. If they need to keep you another day, so be it. And particularly pneumonia. Pneumonia is very tricky. You can die from pneumonia simply because someone did not follow your antibiotic treatment properly. And I'm glad Joe's okay, thank goodness. But he's right. You have to ask questions and you have to push back because it could save your life.
All right, let's go next. Next caller on the line is Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hey, yeah, I don't usually agree with Joe a lot, but I got to agree with him on one thing is it seems like, and my brother, he's an eye doctor in Virginia, it seems like the medical community, and I was talking to him about it too, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to try to stabilize you. If whether or not it's an accident, major injury, or if it's somebody coming to the emergency room trying to use that as a primary care physician. And they're not set up for that. My brother finally retired just a few weeks ago. He's my oldest brother because of increase in, Medicaid and stuff like that. He doesn't get sued that much because he's an eye doctor, but he's had some problems. So all doctors have insurance. And those hospitals, they got really high-priced lawyers. Now, you got to remember that Nashville, the medical industry, and I hate to use the word industry, it should be medical care, is the number 2 or number 3 source of income grossing revenue in Nashville. And I believe that HCA, Healthcare of America, moved their national headquarters here not too long ago. So, I can't remember what my point was. Oh, yeah, they stabilize it, so mistakes will be made. Now, that's what they have insurance for. And I used to be more vehemently against lawyers. He remembers when I first called in, I really give lawyers a hard time. Because I remember when they couldn't use advertise on TV. But after contemplating about it and looking at one of my friends in the Tennessee legislature, he's like, oh, no, we keep our foot on their neck, man. We don't let them litigate that much here in Tennessee. And I was like, wow, because up in Illinois they sure do.
Is Tennessee a tougher state than other states to your knowledge?
Yeah, it is. It is. And Brian's right. What's the #1 employer in Middle Tennessee?
Is it the medical community or would it be universities?
Vanderbilt.
Okay.
And particularly the medical center.
Yeah, right.
He's right about that. And I don't want to use the word stranglehold, but they're a big provider. And because of that, they have a lot of influence in the legislature.
Sure, power.
I think on top of that, juries here are much more conservative than they are in other states, and because of that, there is it makes it more difficult to bring these cases. And I have to agree with Brian in another respect. They have their heels on our necks, and that's why we have to fight every year to make sure they don't pass laws to make it more difficult for patients to sue, because mistakes are going to be made, and people are human. But that's why we have a compensation system set up It's no different than people who are going to rear end other people on the roads. I mean, we know it's going to happen. We have a compensation system set up to try to make people whole when mistakes happen. You have problems, major problems, when you start taking away or chipping away at that compensation system, and people can't be made whole when other people make negligent mistakes.
You've talked about this too with regard to juries. I mean, I think a jury of your peers, and they're sitting there and they're hearing you tell about a story of a client who suffered through this, and I'd said, well, I bet a lot of the jurors are empathizing with your client and they're going to side with it if the evidence is there. And you say it's actually the opposite. It's as though you almost have to, it's like they're like, well, who are you to sue to get a bundle of cash from this hospital? Matt, what do you think the mindset is there? That's just odd to me. I mean, I think if I was on a jury, I'd be open-minded and fair, but I think I would probably identify better with your client than I would some big medical organization.
Yeah, our conventional wisdom is, at least now, is that the people that sit on the jury, there are two things going on. There is the Trump juror, all right, and those people tend to be very, very conservative, and they also tend to be people that say, just get over it, move on. Now, they're the first people to knock on your door when they're the ones that are malpracticed on. Don't ever forget that, Nick. The second part of this, though, is I think people look at the doctor who's on trial and they see their own physician in that place.
Okay.
You like your doctor. I know you do. I love my doctor. I think there's a transposition that takes place during trial where they think, well, this is my doctor on trial in essence. And it's hard. We're trying to figure out ways to get past that, but they get the benefit, the defendants get the benefit of the doubt because of that. We used to call it the Marcus Welby syndrome, where someone looks at a doctor on trial and thinks it's Marcus Welby when it's not. Now, you know, when you got a pretty bad case, then that is dispelled. But if you have a tough case on the merits, and the defendant is a pleasant guy and a good talker, there's a tendency to sort of, you know, put your own physician in his place and give him a break.
Yep. It's the dynamics in the courtroom. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, more calls on hold waiting for you. Clint, our conversation with malpractice attorney Clint Kelly continues right after this. Stay with us.